The Tale of Thandi. In a small village in South Africa nestled at the foot of the Drakensberg Mountains, there lived an old woman named Thandi. Thandi's presence was striking, but not in a way most would call beautiful. Her skin, dark and weathered by years under the sun, was deeply lined, her eyes a piercing gray, and her hair a wiry white that seemed to defy any brush. Years of hardship had worn on her body, leaving her with a stooped frame and a gait that many in the village said resembled a lurking creature. She wore layers of faded cloth to shield herself from the cold winds, giving her an almost spectral appearance. In the superstitious eyes of the villagers, she looked every bit like the witches of old tales, feared and shunned. Rumors swirled around her. Parents warned their children not to go near her small thatched house on the edge of the village, saying she could steal their souls, or, worse yet, their destinies. No one could explain why some villagers fell ill unexpectedly, nor could they understand why others seemed plagued by unexplained misfortune. In the minds of the villagers, Thandi became the scapegoat for all that went wrong. But beneath the wrinkled skin and haunted eyes was a heart that beat with love for her village. Thandi had been born and raised there, the daughter of a healer who had served generations before her. She had learned from her mother the ways of healing through herbs and prayer, and she had grown up watching her mother tend to the sick, the weary, and the hopeless. But times had changed since then. The villagers grew skeptical of traditional healers and looked instead to modern medicine or religious leaders for solace. Still, Thandi prayed for the people she loved each morning and night, hoping for their health, happiness, and prosperity. Yet, to the villagers, she was an outcast. They saw only the strange herbs she collected in the early mornings and the faint smoke from her hut at dawn and dusk. They saw her aged, haggard appearance as a sign of her supposed dark powers, not as a result of years spent caring for others. Every time a harvest failed or livestock died mysteriously, the whispers would start again, blaming her for cursing the village. Each time a young man failed to find a job or a young woman struggled with an illness, Thandi's name would be spoken in hushed, fearful tones. One evening, a particularly cruel rumor began to circulate. A young boy named Sizwe had fallen terribly ill, his fever raging for days despite the doctor's best efforts. His mother, in a state of despair, convinced herself that Thandi had cursed her son. As the boy's fever worsened, the woman began to believe that the only way to save him was to confront the witch herself. With her eyes wild and voice desperate, she stormed to Thandi's house one morning, flanked by several villagers who felt both pity and fear. "You took my boy's health," the woman cried, shaking with grief. "Why, Thandi? What has he ever done to you? Have you taken his destiny too?" Thandi shook her head slowly. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft yet strong. "I have done no harm to him, or to any of you. I would never wish suffering upon this village. I only wish for everyone to thrive, to be happy." But the crowd only saw her as an enemy. They shouted insults, calling her a witch, a thief of souls, and worse. Some even threw stones at her house, smashing the clay pots she had set out to catch rainwater. The young men in the crowd grew bolder, pulling at the branches of the trees in her yard and scattering her medicinal herbs across the ground. Through it all, Thandi remained calm, silently praying for their forgiveness, for their prosperity, and for the boy's recovery. Her heart broke to see such hatred, but she understood it. Fear was a powerful force, and she could see the pain in their eyes, the desperation they felt. She knew they needed someone to blame. and that it was easier to blame her, the one who looked different, the one who had chosen a life apart from theirs. Days passed, and the villagers continued to shun her. Children would run past her house, shouting cruel names, daring each other to get close to her yard, and then running away, giggling in fright. Thandi went about her life as best as she could, tending to her small garden and collecting the herbs she used for prayer and healing. But every day was harder than the last. She began to feel the weight of their scorn pressing down on her, eroding the strength she had once held so dear. One day, however, everything changed. The chief of the village, a wise man who had known Thandi's family for many years, had heard the rumors about her and had watched as the village turned against her. He knew that in times of hardship, people sometimes acted irrationally, and he wanted to put an end to the cruelty. So, he called for a meeting at his palace, inviting all the villagers to gather. He even invited Thandi herself, though he knew how difficult it would be for her to stand before them after all they had done. When the day came, Thandi stood before the gathered villagers, her posture proud and her face calm despite the whispers that ran through the crowd. The chief spoke of unity and compassion, reminding the villagers of the love that Thandi's family had shown the village for generations. "But how can we know she doesn't mean us harm?" someone shouted from the crowd. "How can we know she hasn't taken our blessings for herself?" The chief looked to Thandi, who nodded. She had been preparing for this moment, knowing it was the only way to show them her truth. "If you believe I am the source of your troubles," she said, her voice strong despite the tremor in her hands, "then test me. I have done nothing wrong, and I am willing to prove my innocence." The villagers murmured in surprise, but the chief's wise eyes watched her closely. He knew what Thandi meant. Among the traditions of their ancestors was a test for those accused of witchcraft, a trial by the chief's priest, a man believed to see into the hearts of others. Thandi had faith that she would be judged fairly, and that her love for the village would be recognized. The priest, an elderly man with kind eyes, stepped forward and looked deep into Thandi's eyes. For several long moments, he said nothing, searching for any sign of malice. Finally, he spoke, his voice carrying over the crowd. "This woman is no witch," he declared. "Her heart is full of love, not hatred. She prays for each one of you morning and night. She prays for your health, your happiness, and your success. If any of you doubt her, it is because you do not know her heart." The crowd fell silent, shame washing over them as they realized the cruelty they had shown. One by one, they looked down, unable to meet Thandi's gaze. The young mother of the boy who had been ill stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "I am so sorry, Thandi," she whispered, reaching out to touch the old woman's hand. "We were wrong to accuse you. Can you forgive us?" Thandi, with tears glistening in her gray eyes, took the woman's hand and nodded. "There is nothing to forgive. I love this village with all my heart. I only want you to be well." From that day forward, everything changed. The villagers began to visit Thandi's home for advice and healing, finding comfort in her gentle wisdom and kindness. Children no longer feared her but would come by to hear her stories or ask her about the herbs she used. In time, the village prospered, and they attributed much of their blessings to Thandi's constant prayers. She became a beloved figure, respected and cherished by all. Thandi's years of loneliness had ended, replaced by the love and gratitude of the people she had always served in silence. The villagers had learned a powerful lesson. Fear and prejudice could blind them to the truth, and true beauty lay not in appearances but in the kindness of one's heart.